Hey everybody, it's Brian from A Life After Layoff, and today I want to talk to you about the top 5 reasons why you're not getting the interview. Does this situation sound familiar to you? You're scouring the internet day after day, applying for any position that you're even remotely qualified for, and maybe a few positions that you're not so qualified for. But you're looking for that perfect position, and even when that job comes up, where you've got the exact skill set, the same industry, and you've got the exact job title that this position was requiring, you knew you would be a shoo-in. But all you get is the sound of silence. No phone calls, you don't get any emails, you don't get any word back from the recruiter other than maybe a standard rejection letter. You start to wonder what's wrong with you. Maybe there's a conspiracy. All the recruiters in town got together and decided to put you on a blacklist where we don't call you. I kid, but it really can seem pretty frustrating and pretty hopeless when you are not getting that phone call. It can really start to affect you. So what happens is you go on tilt, and on tilt is an old poker term for meaning losing your cool. And then essentially you start to come across with a sense of desperation, and hiring managers and recruiters sense that desperation, and then they start to lump you into a category that you don't want to be in. It's kind of a vicious cycle where you suddenly become less attractive because you're deemed desperate. If you're in this situation, you're not alone. There are a lot of other people that are struggling to get noticed by recruiters too. As a corporate recruiter myself, I've spent the last 20 years of my career interviewing and hiring thousands of people into some of the world's most prestigious and well-known companies. And I've seen what makes a good candidate stand out and what makes another candidate end up in the no pile, because I was actually the person who was making that initial decision. The good news is that you can improve your chances of being seen by a recruiter if you know what you're doing. Let's talk about some of the reasons why you're not getting the interview. Just a little bit about me. My name is Brian Creeley. I am a human resources professional, and I've got 20 years of experience working with a focus on talent acquisition for some of the world's largest and most well-known companies. I also have a website called alifeafterlayoff.com. It's really focused on helping people survive layoffs and unexpected income losses and people who are in between jobs. We help prepare them to land that dream job. If you find yourself in between positions or you're just looking for a better opportunity, feel free to go check it out. There's a lot of free resources on there. I think you'll find some value. I've got a ton of new content planned, so make sure that you hit the like, subscribe, and maybe that notification button so that you don't miss any of the latest tips on how to land your dream job. Let's get into it. The first reason why you may not be getting that phone call is that you simply aren't being seen. I know that sounds pretty self-explanatory, but if you put yourself into the recruiter's perspective, especially a recruiter that's working in a Fortune 500 company or bigger, we get a lot of applications. Now, it's not unheard of that I'll get anywhere from 50 to over 1,000 different applications for a given role, depending on the location and depending on the job title. And that doesn't even include any outreach that I'm doing as the recruiter. And then you also factor in employee referrals, any agency submissions, and then there's even internal transfers. So I might get an internal candidate that wants to come and move into that position. So you really are stacked up against some pretty fierce competition, especially in well-known organizations. Therefore, it's an absolute requirement for you to have an optimized resume, a well-developed social media presence, and all of the other tools necessary to stand out and get my attention. And even if you have all these things, you still might not be getting noticed. And I know it sounds very frustrating, but it's just the truth of it. How the recruiting process typically works, at least for me, is I would target 5 candidates that I wanted to submit to my hiring managers. So if I had a bucket of 1,000 people, I'm going to go through until I find 50 people that meet the requirements, and I do a pre-screen with them. Once the pre-screen is done, I'm then presenting these 5 candidates to my hiring manager with the expectation that they'll go through and review and try to get them to a second round interview. Now, if the hiring manager pushes back, says, hey, I like 3 out of the 5, then I'm going to go back and try to fill those last 2 that we rejected with 2 new candidates until I get my 5 candidates again to the hiring manager that we can get them through a process. So you have to really have everything optimized in order for me to get you into that bucket. And at any given time, I might be working on anywhere from 15 to 30 requisitions. So if you do the numbers, you do the math, there's no possible way that I could physically look at every single resume that came in. So even though you might be a great fit, it still takes a degree of skill and some luck in order to get seen. Reason number 2, you're not a good fit for the role. So again, this one might seem pretty obvious, and I think a lot of people apply for positions that are maybe a little bit of a stretch for what their background truly is. But how that really works from a recruiting perspective is I sit down with my hiring manager and we do what's called an intake for the role. So the hiring manager and I meet, we look at the job description together, and we determine what are the key requirements that the position needs to have. We have a pretty good understanding of what it is that we are looking for before the recruiting even happens. When you apply for a position, we review your resume with those parameters or with that job profile in mind. And here's the kicker. You have 5 seconds to catch my attention. If you can't catch my attention in the first 5 seconds, which is a very quick glance, then you're going to end up in the no pile and then I move on to the next one. But if you're not experienced, you're just simply not going to get the call. Now let's use a mechanic as an example. Say you're an auto mechanic and you're a really talented auto mechanic, but I work in an airline and I'm looking to hire an airline mechanic. It's two totally different skill sets. Just because you can fix a car does not mean that you can fix an airplane. And quite frankly, if you're not qualified to fix an airplane, I don't think I would want you to fix my airplane, even though you could fix my car perfectly. So in that case, you're just not a fit for the role, even though you may have some of the skills. But if you're too far of a stretch or you don't have that necessary background, we're just not going to call you. You're going to get screened out for it. It's nothing personal. It just is what it is. So I would suggest don't waste yours or the recruiter's time applying for positions that you're clearly not qualified to do. The next reason is maybe you're overqualified. Now, I understand the frustration when you see a position pop up that you know that you have done in the past and that you know you would be really good at. However, you're 2 or 3 steps above it. And I see this as a recruiter quite a bit, where I'll post, say, an entry-level position, and suddenly I get somebody that's 2 or 3 levels above it. Maybe they're a senior leader and they're applying for a job that's clearly below their experience level. And what I start to wonder is why do they want this position? But I get it. When you are in an unemployed situation, you're really willing to kind of look at anything just to get your foot in the door, and you think maybe you'll move on from there. But put yourself into the company's perspective. So as a company, when we're hiring somebody, we are looking for somebody with a traditional career progression. So they typically will hire, say, an entry-level position, and then there's usually a career progression that happens as the person moves along their role. If you bring in somebody that's 2 or 3 levels above, you're kind of disrupting that career progression, and it kind of defeats the purpose of a lot of these entry-level positions we consider them to be feeder positions. So you start off, you learn, pay your dues, and you move into a different role. So something to keep in mind there. And then also from a comp perspective, we're probably not going to be able to do something that would make sense for you. And then we look at that as potentially a flight risk. So we look at it as you're just taking this position because you need a job and you need a paycheck and maybe you need those benefits. Totally understand that. However, the first better job opportunity that comes your way, because guarantee you're still going to be looking for a job when you're taking something that's that far below you as far as experience is concerned, you're going to take the first opportunity that comes your way. So we know that there's a high potential or a high risk of flight, and with the amount of money we spend on developing employees, it just defeats a lot of those purposes. So companies tend to shy away from those overqualified candidates. So that's why it's so important to have a career strategy that's well defined and well implemented, and then also take steps to make sure that you're layoff proof to begin with. So the next reason is the underqualified candidate. Now this is kind of the exact opposite of the overqualified candidate, where you are somebody that's maybe got some of the experience or some of the skills necessary, but you just haven't been doing the job long enough. Here's why it's important. A hiring manager who is hiring an entry-level person is more mentally prepared to nurture and guide this person. So they're also willing to invest more time, energy, and resources in developing the skills because they just realize this person has not had a chance to do them yet, and they're willing to work with them to get them there. Whereas a senior level person is expected to come into a role with minimal support, direction, and training. It's a totally different type of hire. Then you have the senior leadership level. So when you are looking at senior leadership, it's typically very large departments. You're working with pretty significant budgets, and maybe you've never managed a budget before and you've only led 2 or 3 people or like a team lead, and you are underqualified for that role. You're just going to be in over your head. It's not to say that you won't eventually get there, but the jump is going to be too great. And the chances are that hiring manager just isn't in a position to give you the time and the necessary development to make you successful. It's fine to hit a little bit above your weight class. And in fact, as a recruiter, I typically will look for somebody that's a level below the role that I'm trying to fill. However, if you're more than 1 level below, try to find a more appropriate progression. You're going to get there eventually. The final reason why you may not be getting a phone call on your resume is that your career simply is not optimized. This one's a little bit harder to quantify. So you may have found yourself taking any job that came along so long as it met the rate of pay and some other non-career related criteria. Maybe it was a location that you wanted to be in. But here's the thing. By approaching your career without a sense of strategy, without a chess-like strategy, you're likely going to go into an interview without any clear sense of direction, of why you accepted a certain position or where you want to go. And as a recruiter, we're going to sense that. So if you've not optimized your career, you're going to have a hard time trying to justify why you took a position or what the ideal position even is for you. You should always be looking at yourself as a free agent and somebody that's trying to improve their worth on the open market. So while the security of a steady paycheck is nice, in the long run it actually is going to hurt you because you're not going to be seeking out opportunities to improve your skill sets and work towards a certain end goal. So look for positions that are going to help you in your career, even if it means taking a step backward to then take 3 steps forward. You have to look at it from a sense of strategy. By carefully planning out where you want to go in your career, you're going to avoid having that disjointed resume, and you're going to be able to sell yourself with momentum on your side. So there you have it. Those are the top 5 reasons why you're likely not getting the interview. While it can be frustrating not getting any calls back on your resume, you can change it. Learn what you're doing wrong, take the time to fix the things that you need to fix, and you will start to notice a difference. If you still feel like you need additional help, I've created a website called alifeafterlayoff.com. I've loaded it down with a bunch of free and really great information on how to get a leg up on the hiring competition and get noticed by recruiters. Head over there, check out some of the stuff that's over there. We also have a free Facebook community. I would love to see you on there as well. I'll be doing some interacting, trying to answer some questions. So if you feel like you need a little bit of guidance, feel free to jump on there too. And we'll see you next time, guys.